to go live. Okay. So I can't hear the guys in St. Louis. So hopefully everything goes fine during the presentation. So let's get this show started. So I'm Dave Hall. I'm going to be presenting Let the Machines Do the Work. I'll start off with a quick intro about myself. I'm a Drupal developer who also hacks on Python, Bash, bit of JavaScript, basically whatever, PHP, basically whatever clients will pay for me to write. And I also do a fair bit of sysadmin work. I've been trying to automate myself out of a job for many years. I haven't been successful yet. I could go on, but you're not really here to learn about me. Before I get my session started, I've got a couple of legal disclaimers that I have to run through to keep the lawyers happy. The first one is this presentation allegedly contains material which the Jim Henson Company, Disney, Sesame Workshop, and others may be able to claim copyright over. These small pieces of alleged materials are used in this non-commercial educational presentation for the purpose of review and/or comic relief. This is protected by fair use and/or dealing provisions under US copyright law. Before issuing a DMCA takedown notice or other claim of copyright infringement, please search for the Streisand effect. Now, the one to keep my clients happy. The material used in this presentation may or may not include software services and/or methodologies used by my clients. Even if my clients are using such things this very second, they may not continue to do so into the future. My use and/or their use of anything shown in this presentation should not be considered an endorsement. My clients, family, and dog disown any views, opinions, and/or words expressed by me or any other participant in this presentation. If you attempt to implement anything shown during this presentation, you're on your own, and don't worry about suing me. I'm a straw man. Now, I can take a breath, and I promise I won't read slabs of text off slides for the rest of the presentation. Today's presentation is about DevOps. And when we talk about DevOps, I have to cover all the rock stars. So we've got Google with their one big repo and all their automation and being able to run at massive scale. We've got Etsy with Coders Craft, and they've got their blog where they talk about DevOps and all the exciting stuff that they do there. We've got Netflix with their Chaos Monkey, where they just have it run through and randomly kill services and see what the impact of that is. We've got Facebook, who have written 2 implementations of PHP from the ground up because they think they can do a better job of writing PHP. We've got Airbnb, who, they're a startup. They're well known. They must be doing DevOps stuff, so I threw them in the slide deck. We've got GitHub. GitHub do great things with DevOps. People on their first day, they get to commit code that ends up going live in production that same day. Now, GitHub is the only one of those organizations that I've mentioned so far that you'll hear me talk about for the rest of my presentation. Because one of the things I've found when I talk to people is that they get concerned about how to go about implementing automation when they see like these rockstar implementations, and they're left wondering how they can go from manually deploying everything once a month or even less and having so much trouble with deployments and automation. How do they get from that to being one of these rock stars? And often they think they have to build out a rockstar implementation the first time around. And I think that that's just wrong. I should quickly mention Chef and Puppet, so we get that out the way as well. And no, that's not Dick Olson. So we should talk about why you should consider automation. So I think most of you will have seen this quote before. Computers don't make mistakes, people do. Or as I prefer to think of it, computers don't make mistakes, developers do. And so Steve McConnell, in his book Code Complete, estimates that for 1,000 lines of code, you're going to see between 10 and 50 defects in that code. And a lot of organizations, especially small organizations, have developers who write the code being responsible for getting that live, generally through manual processes. And so every step in that manual process is an opportunity for something to go wrong. So basically, you're letting the people who create problems with code create problems in production with the deployment as well as through their code. So I've got a video which I'm going to show, which is from the 1970s, and it's talking about automation. It only goes for less than a minute.
IBM machines can do the work so that people have time to think.
Machines should do the work. That's what they're best at.
People should do the thinking. That's what they're best at. Machines should work. People
Should think.
Machines should work.
People should think.
Machines should work.
People should think.
So I don't do much work anymore. I'm too busy thinking.
So that was produced by Henson Associates, which went on to become the Jim Henson Company, creators of The Muppets, Sesame Street, Fraggle Rock, Dark Crystal, and so on. It was produced for IBM to promote their word processing software and hardware, as it was back then. And I think that it's a very nice point that that we still need humans in the process. We should get the machines to do what they're best at, which is boring, repetitive tasks. And we should have the developers having time to think. So let's have a bit of a think about what we can do in terms of automation that gets us a quick win. And we should pick something small. I think that something like a pre-commit hook is always a good start, because I think all of us have worked with developers who write bad code and a bit disorganized with their work, and they kind of remind me of this guy. Whoops, missed the video. Of this guy.
I love trash. Now look at this restless junk. 5 o'clock, it won't work, and then no telephone, a broken umbrella, a rusty trombone, and I am delighted with all of my own. I love them because they're trash.
So I think we've all worked with an Oscar, and so rather than dealing with the Oscars when the code has actually landed in the Git repo, if the developers are using a pre-commit hook, we can be catching those problems before the code gets committed. So this hook is quite straightforward. It looks for all the changes which are staged to be committed. It runs a PHP lint check. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the lint check, it basically just ensures that the PHP code will compile. And so it will iterate over those files. If one of the files doesn't pass the lint check, then it stops at that point. If all the files pass the lint check, then it will run PHP code sniffer using the Drupal coding standards to make sure that it actually works with the that it complies with the Drupal coding standards. And this only checks the files which have been committed. PHP code sniffer doesn't work on diffs, it works on whole files. So if you've got a project that's a bit messy, you can implement this pre-commit hook or a server equivalent, and you can slowly start improving the quality of your project code over time. The other good thing about the PHP lint check that I forgot to mention is that sometimes you'll find developers, they'll find the first git merge conflict in a file, they'll fix that one and miss others, and this catches those changes before they end up committing the conflicted file. So let's have a look at how this works in action. And I am sorry, I've discovered that the text size is a little bit small in this demo. And so those of you up the back may have to squint a little bit. Let's see how we go. It's a pre-recorded demo. I included some typos in there, so it felt like it was being done in real time. This is Drupal 7 just because it's easier to put together bad module code quickly with Drupal 7. So that's pretty bad code. And so we can see that we've changed the file. And now we'll try to commit those changes. Now, PHP Code Sniffer has caught a bunch of problems. So we can see here that it didn't allow the commit and that it's caught the problems. Now I'll use PHP CBF, which is the PHP code beautifier and formatter, which will fix all the issues that have the crosses next to them in the output above. So as developers, you don't have to go fix all the code yourself through a slow, boring manual process. A lot of it can be fixed automatically for you. So we'll fire up the editor again in a second, and we'll try, first we'll try committing this, and we can see that there's still some issues here that we need to fix up. So we'll put our doc blocks in. It's so much fun watching someone live code, isn't it? Won't be too much longer. There we go. And for those of you who remember the days of Drupal 6, we'll put a Drupal 6 comment in the doc block up there. And we'll also take out the last line, so the lint check will fail, so we can see that. And we can see that there's the lint check failure, so let's fix that up. And now we'll run the check again. And our Drupal 6 style doc block still needs to be fixed. Helps if I can spell. There we go, fix it up. Now I missed the brackets here, so it still fails. We'll fix that up. And now we've managed to actually commit our changes. We can see there that we've got our changes committed. So that's all pretty straightforward. So that small change can over time lead to an increase in the quality of the code for your project. Now, another example of where automation can help, in regulated industries, there's usually a lot of restrictions on what can be done with people's personal information. And so we can't just be passing around database dumps from production, which may contain people's personal information in there. So we need a way of cleaning that up before we can give that to the developers. So what we're going to do is we'll have a bot that will listen in chat. When it's told to, it will fire off a webhook, which will then contact a task runner. The task runner will go off, copy the requested environment to a dedicated environment. It'll run drush SQL sanitize. Now, drush SQL sanitize by default drops email addresses or sanitizes email addresses and usernames. And it can be configured through hooks to do extra scrubbing of the database. So for example, if you enable the paranoia module on your site, which it will drop the data column from the user data, and it'll remove some potentially sensitive variables and things like that for you. And you can also write your own hooks. And so once that's done, it sends it off to the S3, sends it off to storage. In this case, it's going to be stored in S3, and then it goes back to chat and gives the user a limited time access link so they can actually download the database dump. So let's have a look at that in action. Being 2016, of course, we're using Slack for our bot. We list the name of the site and the environment that we want to get the database from. And so what now happens is that Slack will then run off and trigger the task. In this case, we're using iron.io. Now, iron is basically a service that will allow you to have a Docker image and an entry point, and it will just run that as a task. You can provide it variables and stuff, and they provide a webhook for firing that off. It's quite a handy service. And as you can see, this is going to take 8 or 9 minutes to run, and it's always so much fun.
Phenomena. Phenomena. Phenomena.
No more banana now? Okay. So there, our time's passed, the job is completed. We've got our one-time download link. we hit the link, the database dump is downloading, and once that's finished downloading, we can open it up and browse the file. And there we go. It's just a bog standard database dump. So that makes things a lot easier for developers because they don't need to wait for the authorized people to scrub a database dump for them. They can just request it, and within less than 10 minutes, they've got a clean database that they can run locally, and it should function very similar to the production site, and it can be used for debugging and whatever else. So another useful thing is New Relic. I'm a big fan of New Relic. I like using it a lot, but one of the issues I have with New Relic is that often developers only go looking at New Relic when there's a problem. And so they don't actually understand what their site looks like. Normally, they only see it when there's a problem. And so the instant reaction is to go look for where the long-running tasks are, or where there's things that suggest that there might be a problem. Now, maybe at 3 a.m. every day, there's a batch job that kicks off, and it's well known that it's slow and all of that. That's why it runs at 3 a.m. But when you're going through trying to figure out where there's a problem in a site, that big load spike will get some developers digging into that rather than understanding how the site graphs look normally and noticing the anomalies. So one of the things that I recommend is that people take the time to understand their New Relic graphs. But the other thing with New Relic that's really handy is knowing when deployments happen. And New Relic has an API for tracking this. And so what we can do is have New Relic track the deployments. So then when we're looking at the graphs in New Relic, we've got some idea of if a load spike may be caused by a deployment, or after a deployment occurred, we've noticed a 10% increase in load or a 20% increase in page load times or whatever. You've got that data so you can track it. You're not having to go back through your CI server and try to figure out when the deployments to production happened. So I've got a simple demo here just using Pantheon's Quicksilver workflow integration. So, whoops, press the button one too many times. So here we go. We've got our site. And so we can see Devon stage. The title is Quicksilver Demo. What we're going to do is to update the config file with the site title, because that's really easy to do with Drupal 8 and it's an obvious change. Okay, so we've made that change. We'll commit that change. And so once again, I've included a few typos so it looks real. Now we'll push those changes. And then what we're going to do is forget that Pantheon handles dev differently to stage and production. And we're going to refresh the page and not actually see a change and wonder what's going on. Then read the documentation and then manually import the configuration so it gets updated. and then we'll edit out a whole bunch of that, and we'll end up with our title being updated. There we go. Magic of television. So now we want to deploy this change to stage, where New Relic will record this for us. So here we go. And I'm actually thinking that we should have a DrupalCon presentation one time called Watching Grass Grow, which would be just like watching deployments at about the same speed, because they're always so exciting to watch. So this step just takes a few more seconds. There we go. And now if we go over here, we can refresh the page. And this time we've got the title updated properly without any TV magic. So that's now in New Relic. We'll see down the side here, we've actually got the list of events, including deployments. If there's been outages and stuff, they'll show up there as well. But all we care about is deployments. And we can see this deployment has happened. The bars in the chart indicate deployments, and we can see them when we mouse over them. And then we can actually drill down by clicking on that one, and we can actually see when that deployment occurred, the impact on the site. And as we can see, there's been a bit of impact on the site from those deployments. Now, this is all kicked off by this workflow stuff here. One bit is the config import, and the other part is logging to New Relic. So we'll go into, we'll go have a look in at the code for this. This has come from the Quicksilver examples provided by Pantheon. The cache clear needs to be updated to a cache rebuild for Drupal 8. And then this New Relic one's got a few steps, but the key bit here is the API call to call the deployment notification endpoint. And so if you're running New Relic, if you're running on Pantheon or Platform SH or Acquia or deploying straight to AWS, wherever, and whichever CI server you're using for this, be it, you know, a bash script that someone kicks off through to, you know, a full delivery pipeline, a deployment pipeline, you can call this endpoint and send the data about the deployment to the endpoint, so that data gets recorded in New Relic. And when you're dealing with problems later on, you can find that information very easily, and it should help help with your debugging of problems with the site. Another scenario I want to talk about is what I call two repo deployments, where you have two Git repositories. The first one is the one that all the developers have access to. They can create whatever branches they want. They can pretty much go nuts in there. But any branches that are tied to deployments in GitHub would be protected branches. And so to get code into the protected branch, you would need to raise a pull request. And when that pull request is submitted, it would automatically kick off the CI tests. You can use Travis, you can use Circle, CodeShip, Jenkins, whatever, just some kind of system that's going to automatically run a test suite and run it consistently. And so once the tests are done, the pull request would then be merged to the target branch, which would then kick off the deployment to the other repository. And the other repository would have auto deployment tools set up to it. And that can be done in a range of ways. If you're using Platform SH, they have a really nice composer-based workflow where you can just push your composer.json file in your repo and it will actually build everything out. And if you're going to DrupalCon Dublin, which I hope you are, come to my session there and you'll actually get to see this demo working. I'm holding back a couple of things so people have some incentive to come see my talk in Dublin. Before I finish, one thing I really want to encourage people to do is to iterate. Take small changes and iterate on them and just really have a good idea of how those small changes can have a big impact. And the things I've demonstrated today, they've mostly been things that I've found bits of spare time, either on client projects or in my spare time, to put together, and they save me time and effort and save others time and effort every day. So I'd encourage you to iterate, and when you've got a bunch of those small things and they're all working well together, this is what you end up with. So we can see here that it's a whole bunch of small things working very well together. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation for today. I really appreciate your time.
That was very strange. It was very weird. Peculiar. It was kind of amusing. Yes, it was rather funny. It was incredibly funny. I loved it. Yeah, there it is.
Now, if you didn't like my presentation, I encourage you to go watch Meet the Feebles. You might find that more your style. Now, I know we don't have audio, so I'm going to be using using chat with Ken to get any questions that you may have. So thank you again for your time. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. And yeah, hopefully I'll see some of you in Dublin, and I might even get to hear your voice in Dublin. So yeah, thanks.